Welcome, dear listener, to a journey through the culinary wasteland of medieval times. A world where the struggle for food was as real as the biting cold and the ever-present threat of disease. Picture this. You sit at a rickety wooden table, staring into a bowl of thin, colorless gruel, the only meal to sustain you through another grueling day of toil. The bread, hard as a rock, crumbles under the weight of your hunger, a stark reminder of the daily battle against starvation. Meanwhile, just a stone's throw away, the nobles indulge in lavish banquets, their tables overflowing with exotic dishes, fine wines, and spices that could buy a small farm. How did the average peasant survive in such a stark culinary divide? What culinary horrors did they face that would make even the most adventurous eaters shudder? Tonight, we will peel back the layers of history to reveal the grim realities of medieval cuisine, exploring tales of scarcity, creativity, and the absurd lengths people went to just to fill their bellies. So, dim the lights, snuggle up under your favorite blanket, and prepare to dive into a world where food was not just sustenance, but a daily test of endurance and ingenuity. As we embark on this exploration of medieval cuisine, it's crucial to set the stage for understanding the world in which these culinary tales unfold. The Middle Ages, spanning from the 5th to the late 15th century, were marked by a feudal system that created a rigid social hierarchy. At the apex of this pyramid were the nobility, lords and ladies who enjoyed the fruits of the land and the bounty of trade. They dined on sumptuous feasts that would make any modern foodie drool with envy. Picture grand banquets adorned with roasted swan, spiced meats, and delicately crafted pastries, where the air was thick with the aroma of exotic spices like cinnamon and nutmeg, luxuries that were simply unattainable for the average peasant. In stark contrast to these lavish spreads, the life of a medieval peasant was one of relentless toil and struggle. Rising before dawn, they would head to the fields, laboring from sunup to sundown, hoping for a good harvest that would sustain their families through the harsh winters. The daily meal for a peasant was often a far cry from the culinary delights enjoyed by the upper classes. It typically consisted of a simple bowl of pottage, made from whatever grains and legumes were available, and often flavored with the occasional onion or garlic, if they were fortunate enough to have any. Food scarcity was a constant threat, and when the harvest failed, whether due to drought, flooding, or pests, the consequences were dire. Famine was not just a fear, it was a reality that loomed over every meal. In those dark times, peasants were known to resort to desperate measures, foraging for wild plants or scavenging for anything that could stave off hunger. The notion of a balanced diet was almost non-existent, with most people relying heavily on grains, leading to widespread malnutrition and illness. This video will not only delve into the types of food consumed by peasants, but also explore the methods of preservation that were often more about survival than safety. We will uncover the absurd lengths people went to in order to make their meals palatable and the cultural significance of food in a world marked by inequality. As we journey through the culinary landscape of medieval Europe, we will highlight the resilience and creativity that emerged from hardship, reminding ourselves of how far we have come in our culinary journey. So, settle in as we peel back the layers of history and explore why food really sucked in medieval times. For the average medieval peasant, the daily meal was a monotonous ritual that revolved around a single dish, pottage. This thick, stew-like substance was the cornerstone of their diet, providing sustenance in an otherwise unvaried culinary landscape. Imagine a wooden bowl filled with pottage, a thick, soupy concoction that served as the cornerstone of their diet, providing sustenance in an otherwise unvaried culinary landscape. Pottage was not merely food, it was a lifeline, an ever-present reminder of the struggle to survive. Made from whatever ingredients were available, grains, legumes, and the occasional vegetable, it simmered in a pot over the hearth, often for days or even weeks. Each day, new ingredients would be added on top of the old, creating a flavor profile that could best be described as earthy, or more accurately, a blend of desperation and endurance. Picture the scene: a peasant family huddled around a makeshift wooden table, each member eagerly awaiting their turn to ladle out the steaming pottage from the communal pot. The consistency of the meal varied greatly based on the season and what was available. In spring, they might enjoy a slightly richer pottage, filled with fresh greens like nettles or dandelions. But as winter approached, the meal would grow thinner and less flavorful, often reduced to little more than a watery broth. The pottage was usually made by boiling grains like barley or rye with water, often supplemented with whatever vegetables were available. It was customary to toss in a few legumes, such as peas or beans, to add some substance. However, the ingredients were often unpredictable, depending on what the peasant could scavenge or grow in their small plots of land. If the harvest was good, there might be a sprinkling of herbs or a dash of salt. If it was bad, the pottage would be little more than flavored water. The bread, another staple of the peasant diet, was far from the fluffy loaves we enjoy today. Most peasants baked their bread using coarse grains like rye or barley, yielding dense, heavy loaves that crumbled easily. The bread was often riddled with impurities from poor milling techniques, and if you were particularly unlucky, it might contain fillers like ground acorns or sawdust, common practices among unscrupulous bakers trying to stretch their meager supplies. The bread was usually hard as a rock, and if left out for a day, it could easily double as a weapon. Imagine biting into a piece of salted pork, the flavor barely masking the years of struggle it took to raise that animal. Fish was another item that was rarely part of the peasant diet unless they lived near a river or the coast. Even then, fish was often salted to preserve it, leading to a diet that was not only monotonous but could also be downright unappetizing. Despite the hardships, there were moments of relief. Festivals and religious holidays occasionally brought feasts where peasants could enjoy a slightly better meal, often consisting of roasted meat or baked goods. But these occasions were rare, and the reality of everyday meals remained a struggle against the backdrop of scarcity and monotony. The taste of a good meal was more than just flavor. It was a fleeting respite from the harshness of their existence. For the average medieval peasant, the daily meal was a monotonous ritual that revolved around a single dish, pottage. This thick, stew-like substance served as the cornerstone of their diet, providing sustenance in an otherwise unvaried culinary landscape. Made from whatever ingredients were available, pottage typically included grains like barley, rye, or oats, legumes such as peas or beans, and occasionally a few scraps of vegetables gathered from the garden or foraged from the wild. It simmered in a pot over the hearth, often for days or even weeks, with new ingredients added on top of the old, creating a flavor profile that could best be described as earthy, or more accurately, a blend of desperation and endurance. Imagine the scene: a peasant family huddled around a makeshift wooden table, each member eagerly awaiting their turn to ladle out the steaming pottage from the communal pot. The consistency of the meal varied greatly based on the season and what was available. In spring, they might enjoy a slightly richer pottage, filled with fresh greens like nettles or dandelions. However, as winter approached, the meal would grow thinner and less flavorful, often reduced to little more than a watery broth. The process of making pottage was both practical and symbolic. The pot itself was a treasured household item, often handed down through generations. It represented not just sustenance, but familial ties and shared labor. Each stirring of the pot was an act of love and survival. It was a ritual that united family members in their daily struggle against hunger. The pottage was never fully emptied. Instead, it became a kind of eternal stew, a living history of the family's meals, where new flavors melded with the remnants of past meals, creating a unique blend that no one could quite replicate. The ingredients for pottage were often sourced from whatever the family could grow, gather, or barter for. In the spring and summer months, peasants would tend to their small gardens, growing hardy vegetables like onions, leeks, and cabbage. These crops were vital, but the yields were often meager, and any misstep in the cultivation process could mean the difference between survival and starvation. As the harvest season approached, families would work tirelessly to gather their crops, always praying for good weather and favorable conditions. However, the unpredictability of nature meant that many peasants often faced disappointment. A late frost could wipe out crops, and pests could ravage what little grew. During lean months, the ingredients for pottage could become increasingly scarce. The once vibrant greens of spring would be replaced by the dull, gray tones of winter fare. In these desperate times, creativity was essential. Peasants learned to forage for wild plants and herbs, seeking out whatever they could find to add to their meals. Dandelions, nettles, and wild garlic might be gathered from the fields, while roots and tubers could be unearthed from the soil. These foraged additions brought a sense of variety to the otherwise bland diet, offering a fleeting taste of freshness amid the monotony. Bread was another staple of the peasant diet, but it was far from the fluffy loaves we enjoy today. Most peasants baked their bread using coarse grains like rye or barley, yielding dense, heavy loaves that crumbled easily. The bread was often riddled with impurities from poor milling techniques, and if you were particularly unlucky, it might contain fillers like ground acorns or sawdust, common practices among unscrupulous bakers trying to stretch their meager supplies. The bread was usually hard as a rock, and if left out for a day, it could easily double as a weapon. In an era where the concept of a balanced diet was virtually non-existent, peasants relied heavily on these staples to fill their stomachs. The lack of variety not only left them craving more flavorful foods but also took a toll on their health. Malnutrition was rampant, leading to stunted growth, weakened immune systems, and various vitamin deficiencies. Scurvy, caused by a lack of vitamin C, was a common affliction, leading to bleeding gums and loose teeth. The everyday struggle for food not only impacted physical health but also took a psychological toll, as the constant threat of hunger loomed over every meal. Meat was a rare luxury for peasants, typically reserved for special occasions like religious holidays or weddings. When meat did make an appearance, it was often tough and stringy, sourced from older animals that could no longer perform their labor. Imagine biting into a piece of salted pork, its flavor barely masking the years of struggle it took to raise that animal. Even fish, while slightly more accessible, was often unavailable to those living inland, and the church's dietary restrictions during Lent meant that peasants had to make do with what little they had. The struggle for food extended beyond the kitchen. In many cases, peasants found themselves at the mercy of the local lord steward, who monitored their agricultural output and collected taxes and tithes. The lord owned the land, and peasants were required to pay a portion of their harvest to him, often leaving them with scant resources to sustain their families. This practice fostered a deep sense of resentment among the peasantry, who felt that their hard work went unappreciated, and their basic needs were continually overlooked. Despite these hardships, there were moments of reprieve in the form of communal meals and celebratory gatherings. Harvest festivals and religious holidays provided peasants with an opportunity to come together, share food, and momentarily forget their struggles. These occasions were marked by a sense of joy and camaraderie, as families exchanged dishes, danced, and sang songs that celebrated the bounty of the land, however meager it might be. In conclusion, the daily meals of medieval peasants were a reflection of their harsh reality. With limited resources and a monotonous diet, they relied on pottage and coarse bread to survive. The struggle for sustenance was a constant battle, shaped by the whims of nature and the rigid social structure that governed their lives. Yet, amid the hardships, there existed a remarkable resilience, a spirit of creativity and community that allowed them to endure and find meaning in their daily existence. The simple act of sharing a meal, even when it consisted of little more than thin gruel, was a testament to their strength and determination to keep going. Food preservation in the Middle Ages was a complex and often precarious endeavor, especially for the average peasant who faced constant threats of scarcity and hunger. With no refrigeration or modern conveniences to keep food fresh, medieval people relied on various preservation methods that were more about survival than safety. The techniques they employed were born out of necessity, creativity, and a deep understanding of their environment. First and foremost, salting was one of the most common methods used to preserve meat and fish. This process involved heavily coating cuts of meat with salt and storing them in barrels or containers. Salt acted as a natural preservative, drawing moisture out of the meat and inhibiting the growth of bacteria. However, the quality of salt available to peasants was often subpar, leading to issues with spoilage. Many peasants would have to rely on their senses to determine whether the salted meat was safe to eat, making the stakes of every meal potentially deadly. Imagine a peasant family opening a barrel of salted meat, the pungent smell wafting up to greet them. The meat, once fresh and full of flavor, now bore the marks of age and questionable preservation. They would inspect it carefully, looking for any signs of spoilage, a slimy texture, an off-putting odor, or discoloration. If they deemed it safe, they would slice off a piece, hoping it would provide the sustenance needed to carry them through another grueling day of labor. In addition to salting, smoking was another popular preservation technique used to extend the life of meats. Smoking involved hanging cuts of meat over a fire to infuse them with smoke, which helped to dry and flavor the meat while also protecting it from spoilage. The process was both an art and a science, requiring skill and experience to ensure that the meat was properly cured without becoming inedible. The smoky aroma that filled the air during this process was a reminder of the lengths to which medieval people went to secure their food supply. However, smoking was not without its drawbacks. The amount of smoke and heat needed to effectively cure the meat could vary, leading to inconsistencies in flavor and preservation. In a world where resources were limited, improper smoking could mean the difference between a nourishing meal and a trip to the latrine. Peasants often made do with what they had, relying on trial and error to perfect their techniques, all the while praying that their efforts would pay off. Drying was yet another method employed to preserve food, particularly fruits and vegetables. In the summer months, when produce was plentiful, peasants would gather whatever they could and dry it for use during the winter. Apples, pears, and various herbs might be sliced and laid out in the sun to dehydrate, creating a stockpile of food that could be used when fresh produce was scarce. This practice was not only practical but also a way to ensure that nothing went to waste. Imagine the scene: a sunny afternoon in a peasant's garden, where families worked together to slice and dry their bounty. Children played in the background while adults carefully peeled and laid out their fruits, knowing that this simple act could mean the difference between life and death come winter. The dried fruits would later be used in pottage, adding much-needed flavor and nutrition during the harsh months when fresh food was a distant memory. However, the practice of preservation was not just about storing food for future use. It was also a reflection of the harsh realities of medieval life. Peasants were acutely aware of the unpredictability of nature, and they understood that a failed harvest could lead to starvation. The specter of famine loomed large, and the methods they used to preserve food were born out of a desperate need to secure their survival. The Great Famine of 1315 serves as a poignant reminder of this reality. A catastrophic event caused by a combination of heavy rains, crop failures, and poor harvests led to widespread starvation across Europe. Peasants found themselves faced with the grim choice of either consuming what little food they had left or risking their health by foraging for wild plants. Many turned to desperate measures, eating whatever they could find, including grass and tree bark, to stave off hunger. During this time, food scarcity reached crisis levels, and the lengths to which people would go to preserve their food became increasingly desperate. Some peasants resorted to stealing grain from their neighbors, while others sought out the help of local monasteries, where food aid was sometimes available. But even the monasteries faced challenges, as their stores of food dwindled in the face of widespread famine. The psychological toll of food scarcity was immense. The constant threat of hunger created an atmosphere of anxiety and fear, where every meal was a gamble. The idea that one could go to bed hungry, unsure if there would be food in the morning, weighed heavily on the hearts of many. Yet, amid this despair, there was also a remarkable resilience, as families found ways to support each other and make the most of what little they had. Despite the hardships, there were moments of reprieve in the form of communal meals and celebratory gatherings. Harvest festivals and religious holidays provided peasants with an opportunity to come together, share food, and momentarily forget their struggles. These occasions were marked by a sense of joy and camaraderie, as families exchanged dishes, danced, and sang songs that celebrated the bounty of the land, however meager it might be. In conclusion, food scarcity and preservation in medieval times were inextricably linked to the daily lives of peasants. The struggle to secure food was a constant battle, shaped by the whims of nature and the rigid social structure that governed their lives. As they navigated the challenges of preserving food for the long winters ahead, they demonstrated remarkable creativity and resilience. The simple act of sharing a meal, even when it consisted of little more than thin gruel, was a testament to their strength and determination to keep going. In a world where sustenance was often scarce, the ingenuity and resourcefulness of medieval peasants shone through, reminding us of the lengths they went to survive. In medieval Europe, the changing seasons dramatically influenced every aspect of life, particularly the diets of peasants. The rhythm of the agricultural calendar dictated not only what food was available but also shaped the cultural practices surrounding food preparation and consumption. Each season brought its own unique challenges and opportunities, creating a complex interplay between nature and the sustenance of the people. As winter relinquished its icy grip, spring emerged as a season of renewal and hope. The thawing earth signaled the time for planting, and peasants eagerly anticipated the first signs of life in their fields. This was a time of optimism, as families prepared to sow their seeds and nurture the crops that would sustain them through the year. Peasants would rise early, their spirits buoyed by the promise of fresh greens. The arrival of spring meant that the previously barren landscape would soon burst into life, with tender shoots of plants like nettles and dandelions appearing almost overnight. These early greens were a welcome addition to the otherwise monotonous diet of pottage and bread, providing much-needed vitamins and flavors that had been absent during the long winter months. Imagine a peasant family in their small garden, excitedly gathering the first greens of the season. The children would scamper about, plucking the tender leaves and bringing them to their parents, who would carefully wash and prepare them to be added to the evening's meal. The act of foraging for these early vegetables was not just about nourishment. It was a celebration of life returning to the land after the harshness of winter. As the weeks passed and the days grew longer, peasants would begin to plant their crops. Barley, rye, and oats were the staples of their diet, and they would work tirelessly to ensure a good harvest. The planting process was labor-intensive and required careful attention to the weather. Farmers prayed for adequate rainfall and protection from frost, knowing that their very survival depended on the success of their crops. However, the unpredictability of nature meant that even the most diligent efforts could yield disappointing results. A late frost could wipe out newly sown fields, and pests could ravage the tender plants before they had a chance to mature. The anxiety of potential crop failure loomed over every family, and the weight of their hopes rested heavily on the shoulders of those who worked the land. As spring transitioned into summer, the landscape transformed into a patchwork of green and gold. The fields, once empty, now swayed with the promise of a bountiful harvest. However, the reality of summer was not as idyllic as it seemed, especially for the peasantry. The summer months were characterized by grueling labor. From dawn until dusk, peasants toiled in the fields, tending to their crops and ensuring that they were protected from the elements. The sun beat down relentlessly, and the heat could be exhausting, leading to fatigue and dehydration. The labor was physically demanding, but it was also a time of community, as families and neighbors came together to help each other with the harvest. Despite the hard work, summer was also a season of scarcity. As the harvest approached, the need to stretch food supplies became increasingly critical. The previous winter's stored goods began to dwindle, and with no modern means of preservation, peasants had to rely on their ingenuity to make what little they had last. During this time, the village would engage in communal foraging, gathering whatever wild fruits and vegetables could be found in the surrounding woods and fields. Berries, nuts, and edible plants provided brief reprieves from the monotony of their diet, but these were seasonal treats that could only be enjoyed for a limited time. The importance of preserving these foraged foods was paramount, and women often spent hours drying fruits and herbs to prepare for the upcoming winter months. However, the summer heat also brought its own set of challenges. Without refrigeration, food spoilage was a constant threat. Meat, which was rarely consumed fresh, had to be salted or smoked quickly, or it would go bad. The smell of rancid food could permeate a household, and the risk of foodborne illness was ever present. Those who fell ill often faced dire consequences, as medical knowledge was limited, and remedies were often ineffective. The summer was also marked by the anxiety of potential famine. If the harvest did not meet expectations due to drought, pestilence, or disease, entire communities could face starvation. The fear of not having enough food to last through the winter hung heavily over the peasant population. The Great Famine of 1315 serves as a haunting reminder of this reality. As the days began to shorten and the air turned crisp, autumn heralded the harvest season, a time of both labor and celebration. After months of hard work, peasants could finally reap the fruits of their labor. The sight of golden fields filled with ripe grains brought a sense of relief and joy, as families gathered together to collect and store the food that would sustain them through the winter. This was the moment every peasant had worked for, and the atmosphere was filled with a palpable sense of excitement. The harvest festival was one of the few times of the year when peasant families could come together to celebrate their hard work. They would share meals, dance, and sing songs of gratitude for the bounty of the land. It was a time of community, where everyone contributed what they could to ensure that no one went hungry. However, the joy of the harvest was often accompanied by the harsh reality of the impending winter. As crops were gathered and stored, the knowledge that food supplies would soon dwindle cast a shadow over the festivities. The fear of scarcity loomed large, and many families worked tirelessly to ensure that they had enough to last through the long, cold months ahead. The act of preserving food became crucial during this time. Grains were carefully stored in granaries, and vegetables were pickled or dried to extend their shelf life. Apples and pears would be sliced and laid out to dry in the sun, while root vegetables were buried in the ground, where they could remain cool and protected from frost. This process was not just practical. It was a ritual that connected families to their land and their ancestors. As autumn faded into winter, the last of the harvest would be consumed, and the reality of scarcity would set in. The once bustling fields would become still and silent, leaving peasants to rely on their stores of preserved food as they faced the challenges of the cold months ahead. When winter descended, the world transformed into a harsh and unforgiving landscape. The fields lay barren under a blanket of snow, and the cold crept into every corner of the peasant's home. The daily struggle for food became even more pronounced during these months, as the options for sustenance dwindled to nearly nothing. Peasants relied heavily on their stores of preserved food, but as the winter dragged on, supplies would inevitably begin to run low. The pottage that had once been a comforting staple now became a grim reminder of scarcity, often reduced to little more than hot water with a few scraps thrown in. The flavors that had once provided nourishment were replaced by a dull, unappetizing sameness that could wear down even the most resilient spirit. The harsh reality of winter meant that every meal became a battle against hunger. Families would huddle around the hearth, sharing what little they had, while the bitter cold seeped into their bones. The threat of famine loomed large, and the specter of starvation was a constant companion. Peasants often turned to desperate measures in these times, foraging for whatever wild plants or roots they could find, hoping to stave off hunger for just one more day. In this unforgiving season, the act of sharing food became a powerful symbol of community and resilience. Neighbors would come together, pooling their resources to ensure that no family went hungry. The bonds formed during these difficult times were crucial, as they provided a lifeline of support and solidarity in a world that often felt isolating. As the days began to lengthen and the first signs of spring appeared, the peasant diet would slowly shift again. The promise of new life would bring a renewed sense of hope for the future, but the memories of winter's hardships would linger long after the snow had melted. The seasonal cycle of food, its scarcity, preservation, and eventual abundance, was a reminder of the resilience of medieval peasants and their ability to adapt to the challenges of their environment. In stark contrast to the meager meals of the medieval peasantry, the nobility reveled in extravagant feasts that were as much about power and status as they were about sustenance. These grand banquets were not merely occasions for dining, they were spectacles of wealth and opulence, designed to impress guests and solidify social hierarchies. Imagine a great hall adorned with tapestries depicting heroic deeds, the air thick with the aroma of roasted meats, spiced wines, and exotic ingredients that transported the senses to distant lands. The preparation for such banquets was a colossal undertaking, requiring skilled cooks, servants, and an abundance of resources. Nobles would often have their own kitchens, staffed by a team of cooks who specialized in various aspects of food preparation. The head cook, a position of significant prestige, orchestrated the culinary symphony, ensuring that every dish was prepared to perfection. Each meal served was more than just food. It was a display of the host's wealth and influence, a demonstration of their ability to procure rare and luxurious ingredients. Meats were the centerpiece of these lavish feasts, ranging from the common to the extraordinary. Roasted swan, peacock, and even exotic game like stag or venison graced the tables of the wealthy. The preparation of these dishes was elaborate, often involving intricate cooking techniques and lavish garnishes. The meat would be seasoned with spices that were worth their weight in gold: cinnamon, ginger, pepper, and saffron, all of which were imported from far-off lands and could cost more than a peasant's entire year's wages. Imagine the spectacle of a roasted swan, its skin glistening and golden, served with a flourish at the head of the table. Guests would gasp in admiration as the head cook presented the dish, carefully placing it before the lord of the manor, who would then carve it with a show of skill and authority. The swan, adorned with fruits and spices, was not just a dish. It was a symbol of status, a centerpiece that commanded attention and admiration. In addition to the meats, banquets featured a cornucopia of side dishes, salads, and pastries. Peasants would marvel at the variety of food available to the nobility, who enjoyed dishes made from fresh vegetables, herbs, and fruits. Salad greens, dressed with oil and vinegar, might accompany a rich meat dish, while pies filled with spiced fruits could serve as a sweet conclusion to the meal. These pastries, often beautifully crafted, were a testament to the skill of the bakers, showcasing intricate designs that delighted the eye as much as the palate. Beverages at these banquets were equally extravagant. While peasants made do with weak ale, the nobility enjoyed rich wines, often imported from France or Italy, spiced and sweetened to enhance their flavors. A good wine was a mark of sophistication, and hosts would often boast about the quality of the wine served at their table. Imagine the clinking of goblets as laughter and lively conversation filled the hall, with guests toasting to their health and wealth, the air thick with camaraderie and indulgence. Yet, the opulence of these banquets came with its own set of dangers. Overindulgence was common among the nobility, and many a guest found themselves suffering the consequences of a hearty meal. Foodborne illnesses were rampant, and the lack of proper food safety measures made it all too easy for spoiled dishes to make their way to the table. One infamous anecdote tells of King John of England, who succumbed to illness after overindulging in peaches and new cider, likely leading to a fatal case of dysentery. This tragic story serves as a reminder that even the wealthiest were not immune to the perils of food spoilage. The darker side of these grand feasts was not lost on the hosts, who understood the fine line between indulgence and excess. Guests were often served multiple courses, and the sheer volume of food consumed could lead to painful digestive issues. The atmosphere in the Great Hall, filled with laughter and revelry, could quickly turn into one of discomfort and regret as guests found themselves grappling with the consequences of their overindulgence. Despite the potential for disaster, these banquets were a crucial aspect of noble life, serving not only as a source of sustenance but also as a means of social and political maneuvering. Invitations to these feasts were highly sought after, and attendance could elevate one's status within the social hierarchy. Nobles would invite local lords, knights, and influential figures, using the occasion to forge alliances, settle disputes, and showcase their wealth and power. The grand narratives woven during these feasts often shaped the political landscape of the time. Discussions of land, power, and alliances took place over platters laden with food, and promises made at the table could alter the course of history. The act of sharing a meal was laden with significance. It was a ritual that transcended mere sustenance, becoming a catalyst for loyalty and allegiance. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere in the Great Hall would shift. The initial formality of the meal would give way to more relaxed interactions. Wine flowed freely, laughter echoed off the stone walls, and the once stoic lords and ladies became animated in their conversations. Jests and stories were exchanged, and the rigid class distinctions that defined daily life began to blur. For a brief moment, the peasants outside looking in could envision a world where everyone shared in the abundance, where the laughter of the rich mingled with the hopes of the poor. In conclusion, the banquets of the nobility were a world apart from the grim realities faced by peasants. These extravagant feasts represented the height of medieval culinary culture, showcasing the vast disparities between social classes. For the wealthy, food was not just a means of survival. It was a symbol of power, influence, and community. However, the dangers of overindulgence and the specter of illness served as a reminder that even the most lavish of meals could have dire consequences. As we reflect on the stark contrast between noble and peasant diets, let us appreciate the complexity of medieval food culture and the stories that it tells about society, resilience, and the human experience. While the nobility of medieval Europe delighted in their lavish feasts, the extravagant displays of wealth came with hidden dangers and often serious consequences. The notion of a grand banquet, overflowing with exotic dishes and fine wines, was not just a celebration of abundance. It was also a double-edged sword that could lead to illness, discomfort, and even death. As we delve into the darker side of these opulent meals, we uncover the myriad ways in which overindulgence could turn a celebration into a tragedy. First and foremost, the lack of proper food safety measures in medieval kitchens made foodborne illness a constant threat. With no understanding of germs or the importance of hygiene, nobles often consumed spoiled or contaminated food without a second thought. It was not uncommon for lavish dishes to be prepared using ingredients that had gone bad, leading to a host of health issues. Take, for example, the exquisite roasted swan that graced the tables of the wealthy. While the presentation might have been breathtaking, the reality of its preparation often left much to be desired. The swan, like many other meats, was typically slaughtered days or even weeks before it was served. If not properly salted or cooked, the meat could harbor dangerous bacteria, leading to serious illness among unsuspecting guests. Documented accounts from this period reveal that foodborne illnesses were rampant, with even the wealthiest families falling victim to the perils of spoiled fare. One particularly infamous incident involved King John of England, who succumbed to a fatal case of dysentery after indulging in a feast that included peaches and new cider. Historians believe that the peaches, likely overripe and improperly stored, were the culprits behind his untimely demise. The king's death serves as a stark reminder that no one, regardless of their social status, was immune to the consequences of poor food handling. Even the most extravagant dishes, adorned with spices and garnishes, could pose risks. Nobles often boasted about the quality of their food, but those claims were sometimes more about reputation than reality. Unscrupulous cooks, eager to cut corners, might use questionable ingredients or neglect hygiene in their kitchens. The result was a dangerous gamble for those who dined at these lavish banquets, where every bite could lead to illness or discomfort. The influence of the Catholic Church on medieval life cannot be overstated, and nowhere was this more evident than in the dietary rules that governed what and when people could eat. The Church was not merely a spiritual authority, it was a powerful institution that dictated the rhythms of daily life, including the very food that graced the tables of both nobility and peasantry. During the medieval period, the Church established a calendar filled with feast days and fasting periods, intricately woven into the lives of the faithful. Among the most significant of these was Lent, a 40-day period of fasting and penance leading up to Easter. From Ash Wednesday to Holy Saturday, the Church mandated strict dietary restrictions that forbade the consumption of meat, dairy products, and eggs. For the already struggling peasantry, this was a cruel twist of fate, as it meant giving up what little protein and nutrition they could access. Imagine a peasant family preparing for Lent. They would look at their meager stores of food, knowing that the next 6 weeks would require them to forego not just meat but also the small luxuries they had come to rely on: milk, cheese, and eggs. Instead, they would have to subsist on a diet of bread, pottage, and whatever vegetables they could manage to gather or store. This enforced deprivation cast a long shadow over their daily lives, exacerbating their already tenuous relationship with food. The Church's dietary rules were rooted in a belief that fasting was a form of spiritual discipline. The idea was that by denying oneself the pleasures of the flesh, one could cleanse the soul and draw closer to God. While this was a noble sentiment, the reality for many peasants was far from uplifting. The lack of adequate nutrition during these fasting periods often led to malnutrition, a condition that left many vulnerable to disease and illness. As Lent progressed, the physical toll of fasting became increasingly evident. Families who had once relied on the meager scraps of salted meat or the occasional fish found themselves struggling to stay nourished. Their bodies weakened, and the gnawing hunger became a constant companion, making it difficult to perform the labor required to maintain their fields and livestock. In an ironic twist, the Church's fasting regulations sometimes led to creative culinary adaptations. Peasants began to experiment with dishes that could provide some semblance of satisfaction without breaking the fast. This included the use of fish, which was allowed on certain days, but even fish was often difficult to come by for those who lived inland. As a result, some peasants turned to less conventional sources of protein, such as beaver tails, which were classified as fish by the Church during Lent. This theological loophole allowed them to enjoy a rare treat, but it also highlighted the lengths to which people would go to comply with religious edicts while still attempting to nourish themselves. The cultural impact of fasting. The dietary restrictions imposed by the Church were not merely a matter of individual piety. They were woven deeply into the social fabric of medieval life. The Church's influence extended into the realm of community and culture, shaping how people interacted with one another over meals and during festivals. Fasting days, mandated by the Church, became moments of collective identity. Villagers would gather for communal meals, often sharing what little food they had. These gatherings fostered a sense of solidarity among peasants, as they endured the hardships of fasting together. The act of sharing a meal, even during times of deprivation, became a symbol of community and resilience, reinforcing social bonds that were critical for survival. On feast days, however, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The end of Lent was marked by joyous celebrations, where families would come together to feast on the rich foods that had been denied to them for weeks. The first meal after Lent was often a grand affair, filled with roasted meats, creamy cheeses, and decadent desserts. This transition from deprivation to abundance provided a stark contrast that highlighted the importance of food in marking the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Religious festivals, like Easter and Christmas, were particularly significant in the context of medieval food culture. These occasions were marked by special dishes that held both spiritual and cultural meaning. For instance, Easter celebrations often included lamb, symbolizing sacrifice and rebirth, while Christmas feasts featured rich pastries and spiced wines that celebrated the joy of the season. The rituals surrounding these feasts were steeped in tradition, often reflecting the agricultural calendar and the changing seasons. The preparation of food for these celebrations became a communal effort, with families and neighbors working together to create dishes that would honor their faith while also showcasing their culinary skills. The Church's dietary rules also affected the way people viewed food and its significance. It was not merely sustenance, it was a means of connecting with the divine. The act of eating became imbued with spiritual importance, where each meal was an opportunity to reflect on one's relationship with God and the community. The Church taught that the sharing of food was an act of charity, and those who had enough were expected to share with those who did not. Superstitions and beliefs. In addition to the dietary rules imposed by the Church, Medieval society was rife with superstitions and beliefs related to food and health. These cultural beliefs, often intertwined with religious doctrine, shaped how people approached not only what they ate but also how they viewed illness and wellness. Many medieval people believed that certain foods could bring about divine favor or punishment, depending on how they were consumed. For instance, it was widely thought that consuming meat on designated fasting days was not only a breach of church doctrine but also an invitation for illness or misfortune. This belief led to a heightened sense of anxiety surrounding food, where each meal was laden with the weight of moral judgment. Herbal remedies were also common, with people relying on the wisdom of folk traditions to treat ailments. While some herbs were genuinely beneficial, others were steeped in superstition and had little effect. For example, garlic was believed to ward off illness and evil spirits, while other herbs were seen as protective charms against the unseen forces of the world. The idea of the evil eye was prevalent during this time, with many believing that jealousy or malice from others could lead to illness or misfortune. As a result, peasants often wore amulets or carried herbs as a form of protection. This intersection of food, belief, and health created a complex landscape where dietary choices were often dictated by superstition as much as by necessity. Communal meals also served as a space for the exchange of folklore and traditional wisdom. As families gathered to share what little food they had, stories about the power of certain foods or the consequences of breaking dietary rules would circulate. These tales not only provided a sense of identity but also reinforced the social norms surrounding food and health within the community. Festivals and feasts. The church's influence on medieval food culture extended beyond dietary rules and superstitions. It also shaped the very fabric of communal life through festivals and feasts. These events provided peasants with a much-needed respite from the daily grind of labor and hardship, allowing them to come together in celebration and gratitude. Feast days were marked by abundant meals that showcased the best of local produce, meats, and baked goods. Villagers would often contribute to the feast, bringing dishes that reflected their individual culinary traditions and family recipes. This celebration of food became a way to honor the community, the church, and the changing seasons. In addition to the communal aspect of feasting, these events also held economic significance. The preparation and consumption of food during festivals provided a boost to local economies, as merchants and farmers sold their goods in anticipation of the increased demand. The exchange of food and resources during these celebrations fostered a sense of interconnectedness within the community, reinforcing social bonds that were crucial for survival. As we reflect on the influence of the church and culture on medieval food, it becomes evident that the rituals surrounding food were not merely about sustenance. They were about identity, community, and spirituality. The shared experience of eating, whether during a time of fasting or feasting, served to unite people in their struggles and triumphs. In conclusion, the influence of the church on medieval dietary rules had profound implications for both the nobility and the peasantry. The enforced fasting periods and communal feasting rituals shaped not only what people ate but also how they viewed themselves and their place in the world. Through the lens of food, we can gain insight into the complexities of medieval life, where survival was often a collective endeavor, and the bonds forged over meals were as important as the food itself. The stories of resilience, creativity, and community that emerged during this time continue to resonate today, reminding us of the enduring power of food to connect us all. Beyond the risk of foodborne illness, the sheer volume of food consumed during these feasts could lead to painful digestive issues. Nobles often indulged in multiple courses, feasting on rich meats, creamy sauces, and sugary desserts, all washed down with copious amounts of wine. The combination of heavy foods and excessive drink could quickly overwhelm even the strongest stomach. Imagine the scene. Guests piled their plates high with roasted meats, pastries, and other delicacies, their eyes gleaming with excitement as they sampled each dish. The laughter and merriment filled the air, but as the night wore on, the consequences of their indulgence began to manifest. Guests could be seen clutching their stomachs, grimacing in discomfort, and seeking relief in the form of fresh air or a quiet corner to recover. The tradition of feasting often led to a culture of gluttony among the nobility, where the act of overindulgence became a point of pride. Many nobles engaged in eating contests, challenging one another to consume as much food as possible. These competitions, while entertaining, could have dire consequences. Reports of nobles suffering from indigestion, vomiting, or even collapsing from overeating were not uncommon. One particularly notorious anecdote tells of a nobleman who attempted to outdo his peers at a banquet, consuming an astounding amount of food within a single sitting. The result was not just embarrassment but severe illness that left him bedridden for weeks. Such stories circulated among the nobility, serving as cautionary tales about the perils of excess. The dangers of overindulgence at these grand feasts extended beyond individual health. The social and political ramifications of extravagant banquets could shape alliances and rivalries among the nobility. While feasting served as a means of building camaraderie and reinforcing social hierarchies, it could also lead to tensions and conflicts. Nobles were often judged by the quality and quantity of food they served at their banquets. A poorly executed feast could tarnish a host's reputation, leading to whispers of discontent among their peers. In a world where social standing was paramount, the pressure to impress guests with lavish displays of culinary prowess was immense. In some cases, the fallout from a disastrous banquet could lead to open conflict. If a noble hosted a feast that was perceived as inadequate or offensive, it could strain relationships and create animosity among rival factions. The stakes were high, and the expectations were even higher. Nobles were not just serving food, they were engaging in a delicate dance of power and influence, where a single misstep could have dire consequences. Moreover, the extravagant feasts of the nobility often served as a stark reminder of the inequality that permeated medieval society. While the wealthy dined on rich and varied foods, the peasantry struggled to secure even the most basic sustenance. The contrast between the experiences of the two classes was jarring, and it fostered resentment among the lower classes. As peasants looked on from outside the grand halls, they were acutely aware of the disparity that existed in their society. The lavishness of noble banquets was a constant reminder of their own struggles, and the knowledge that their labor fed the very tables they could not sit at was a bitter pill to swallow. Despite the dangers and disparities associated with noble feasts, these gatherings left an indelible mark on culinary history. The extravagant displays of food and drink, the elaborate preparations, and the rituals surrounding these banquets contributed to the development of modern culinary practices. Many of the techniques and flavors enjoyed by the nobility eventually trickled down to the lower classes, influencing the evolution of medieval cuisine. The use of spices, once seen as a luxury for the wealthy, gradually became more accessible to the middle and lower classes as trade routes expanded and agricultural practices improved. The culinary innovations born out of noble banquets laid the foundation for future generations, shaping the way we think about food and dining today. Furthermore, the stories and traditions surrounding these feasts continue to resonate in contemporary culture. From the lavish holiday meals we celebrate today to the modern emphasis on culinary artistry, the legacy of medieval banquets lives on. The idea that food can be a medium for social connection, storytelling, and cultural identity remains as relevant today as it was in the grand halls of the medieval nobility. In conclusion, while the banquets of the nobility were marked by extravagance and opulence, they were not without their dangers. The risk of foodborne illness, the consequences of overindulgence, and the social ramifications of these gatherings all contributed to a rich tapestry of culinary history. As we reflect on the stark contrast between noble and peasant diets, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complexity of medieval food culture and the stories it tells about society, resilience, and the human experience. While the grand feasts of the nobility dazzled with their opulence, the kitchens behind the scenes often held secrets that were far less glamorous. The culinary practices of medieval chefs were filled with deception, improvisation, and a fair share of scandal. In a world where the distinction between nobility and peasantry was stark, the secrets of the kitchen became a battleground for both culinary innovation and survival. One of the most pervasive issues in medieval kitchens was food adulteration. Chefs and bakers were often under immense pressure to produce dishes that would impress their patrons while also maximizing profits. This sometimes led to unscrupulous practices that compromised the quality and safety of the food being served. Bakers, in particular, faced scrutiny over the quality of their bread. Bread was a staple of the medieval diet, and its purity was of utmost importance. However, in times of scarcity, many bakers resorted to stretching their flour supplies with cheap fillers. Ground acorns, chalk, sawdust, and even ground bones were often mixed into the dough to bulk it up. The result was a loaf that could be dense, gritty, and lacking in both flavor and nutrition. Imagine biting into a piece of bread that crumbled like dry earth, the taste a far cry from the soft, warm loaves we enjoy today. The practice of adulterating bread was so common that it became a subject of legal regulation. Laws were enacted to ensure the weight and quality of bread sold to the public, and bakers found guilty of cheating their customers faced severe penalties. However, enforcement was often lax, and many bakers continued to cut corners, knowing that the risks were relatively low compared to the potential profits. Similarly, the practice of watering down ale and wine was rampant among tavern keepers and brewers. In a society where clean drinking water was scarce, ale was a common beverage, consumed by people of all ages. However, to increase profits, many innkeepers diluted their brews with water, producing a weak and unsatisfying drink. This practice earned some alewives a notorious reputation, as patrons complained about the poor quality of their drinks. Imagine entering a tavern after a long day of labor, yearning for a refreshing pint of ale only to be served a watery concoction that barely quenched your thirst. The disappointment would be palpable, and yet, desperate for a drink, many peasants had little choice but to accept whatever was offered. The kitchens of the nobility were also rife with their own scandals and intrigues. The culinary staff often worked in a hierarchy, with the head cook wielding significant power over the other cooks and kitchen hands. However, this power dynamic could lead to rivalries and betrayals within the kitchen walls. In some cases, cooks would sabotage each other's dishes out of jealousy or competition. A poorly prepared dish could lead to public humiliation for the cook, and the stakes were high in such a high-pressure environment. If a dish failed to impress the guests, it could tarnish the reputation of the entire kitchen staff, leading to the dismissal or punishment of the culprits. Anecdotes abound of cooks who would intentionally alter recipes or use inferior ingredients to undermine their rivals. Imagine a banquet where two cooks were vying for the favor of the Lord, each determined to outdo the other. One might slip a bitter herb into the other's dish, rendering it unpalatable, while the other would respond in kind, leading to a culinary battle that played out in front of the unsuspecting guests. The use of spices also played a significant role in the culinary secrets of the time. While noble kitchens were stocked with an array of exotic spices, their availability was limited by cost and trade routes. As a result, many cooks resorted to using cheaper substitutes or even fake spices to stretch their budgets. For instance, a cook might use sawdust or other fillers to mimic the texture of more expensive spices, deceiving the diners into believing they were consuming a lavishly spiced dish. The art of presentation was another vital aspect of noble feasts, and here, chefs often employed theatrical techniques to enhance the dining experience. The visual appeal of a dish was just as important as its taste, and cooks would go to great lengths to create stunning presentations that dazzle the guests. Imagine a roasted peacock, its feathers fanned out beautifully on the platter, garnished with fruits and herbs. The spectacle of such a dish was intended to impress, but it also required a great deal of skill and artistry. Cooks would often create elaborate centerpieces, using fruits and vegetables to craft intricate designs or sculptures that adorned the dining table. These displays served not only as a visual feast but also as a status symbol, showcasing the wealth and creativity of the host. However, the pressure to create stunning presentations could lead to further deception. In some cases, cooks would use artificial coloring or other tricks to enhance the appearance of dishes. For instance, they might use saffron to dye rice or manipulate the appearance of sauces to make them look richer and more appealing. While these practices added to the visual allure of the meal, they also raised questions about the authenticity of the food being served. Moreover, the tradition of serving dishes that were not what they seemed was not uncommon. Cooks would sometimes prepare surprise dishes, food that had been cleverly disguised or altered to create an element of surprise for the diners. These dishes could range from sweet pastries that had savory fillings to roasted meats that were presented in an unexpected way. For example, a dish might be prepared to resemble a pie, only to reveal a savory meat filling once cut open. While these culinary surprises could delight guests, they also carried risks. A dish that was poorly executed could lead to confusion and disappointment among diners, and if a surprise ingredient was unpalatable or unexpected, it could tarnish the reputation of the kitchen. The balance between creativity and authenticity in noble kitchens was a delicate one, and the culinary staff had to navigate these challenges carefully. The culinary secrets of medieval kitchens reveal a world of deception, rivalry, and artistry that shaped the feasting experiences of the nobility. While the grand banquet served as a showcase of wealth and status, the hidden practices of food adulteration and kitchen intrigue remind us that the culinary world was not always what it appeared to be. As we reflect on the stark contrast between noble and peasant diets, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complexity of medieval food culture and the stories it tells about society, resilience, and the human experience. The lavish feasts of the nobility may have dazzled the senses, but they were also steeped in secrets that speak to the challenges faced by those who prepared the food. Ultimately, the legacy of these culinary practices continues to resonate in our modern world, where the pursuit of quality, authenticity, and creativity in cooking remains as vital as ever. By understanding the intricacies of medieval cuisine, we can better appreciate the journey that has brought us to the diverse and vibrant culinary landscape we enjoy today. In medieval Europe, the relationship between food and belief systems was intricate and deeply rooted in the cultural fabric of society. Superstitions regarding food were pervasive, influencing not only what people consumed but also how they understood health, illness, and the world around them. These beliefs were often intertwined with religious doctrine, creating a complex landscape where dietary choices became laden with moral and spiritual significance. Superstitions in medieval society served as a means of understanding and coping with an unpredictable world. Without the scientific knowledge we possess today, people relied on these beliefs to explain phenomena they could not comprehend. Illness, crop failures, and natural disasters were often attributed to supernatural forces, divine punishment, or the envy of others. In this context, food became a focal point for many of these beliefs, as what one consumed could be seen as directly connected to one's fate. For peasants, the act of eating was not merely a necessity but a ritual that carried weighty implications. The belief in the evil eye, for instance, suggested that envy or malice from others could lead to misfortune or sickness. To protect themselves, many peasants wore amulets or carried herbs believed to ward off negative energies. Garlic, in particular, was seen as a potent talisman against illness and evil spirits. Its pungent aroma and strong flavor made it a staple in the peasant diet, serving both as a seasoning and a protective charm. Imagine a peasant woman preparing a meal, her hands deftly chopping garlic to add to the pot. As she worked, she might mutter a quiet prayer or incantation, invoking the protection of the saints or the spirits of her ancestors. The act of cooking was imbued with meaning, transforming a simple meal into a sacred ritual. Each ingredient carried significance, and the way food was prepared and consumed became a reflection of one's beliefs and values. Food choices were also considered a reflection of one's moral standing. The Church taught that certain foods were sinful or impure, and consuming them could lead to spiritual as well as physical consequences. For instance, eating meat on designated fasting days was not only a breach of church doctrine but also a way to invite illness or misfortune into one's life. This belief created a heightened sense of anxiety surrounding food, where each meal was laden with the weight of moral judgment. Peasants were often caught in a moral dilemma when it came to their diets. While they might yearn for the richness of meat and dairy, they were acutely aware of the religious expectations placed upon them. Many families adhered to the Church's dietary restrictions out of fear of divine punishment, even if it meant enduring hunger. The notion that suffering in this life would lead to rewards in the next was a powerful motivator for many peasants, and it shaped their relationship with food in profound ways. The Church also encouraged the idea that fasting and deprivation were paths to spiritual enlightenment. During Lent, for example, the faithful were called to abstain from meat, eggs, and dairy products, relying instead on a diet of bread and vegetables. This enforced deprivation was not just a test of willpower. It was seen as a way to purify the soul and draw closer to God. For the peasantry, who already struggled to secure enough food, the fast could feel like a cruel burden, compounding their hardships rather than alleviating them. The interplay between food and ritual in medieval society cannot be overlooked. Rituals surrounding food were deeply embedded in the culture, with communal meals and celebrations serving as opportunities to reinforce social bonds and cultural identity. Festivals and feast days were occasions for families to come together, share food, and celebrate their shared heritage. During these gatherings, specific dishes were prepared that held both cultural and spiritual significance. For example, during Easter, lamb was often served as a symbol of sacrifice and rebirth. The preparation of these special meals was steeped in tradition, with families passing down recipes and techniques from generation to generation. The act of cooking for these occasions was not just about sustenance. It was a way to honor ancestors, celebrate community, and connect with the divine. Communal meals during festivals also fostered a sense of solidarity among peasants. As they gathered around the table, sharing what little they had, the bonds of community were strengthened. These moments provided a respite from the daily grind of labor, allowing individuals to celebrate their shared humanity and resilience in the face of adversity. However, the rituals surrounding food also served to reinforce existing social hierarchies. The offerings made during festivals were often determined by social status, with wealthier families able to provide more lavish contributions. This disparity was not lost on the peasantry, who could only watch as the nobility feasted on richly prepared dishes while they made do with whatever scraps remained. The beliefs surrounding food and health in medieval society were often steeped in superstition and tradition. Many people turned to herbal remedies, relying on the wisdom of folk traditions to treat ailments. While some herbs were genuinely beneficial, others were steeped in superstition and had little effect. For instance, it was common for people to believe that certain foods had mystical properties. Honey was regarded not just as a sweetener but as a healing agent. It was often used to soothe sore throats and wounds, with people believing it possessed divine qualities. However, the lack of scientific understanding meant that many remedies were based on trial and error, often resulting in ineffective treatments that did little to alleviate suffering. Illness was also viewed through the lens of spirituality. People believed that sickness was often the result of divine punishment for sins or moral failings. If a child fell ill, it was commonly perceived as a test of faith. Families would turn to the church for guidance, seeking the prayers of a priest to intercede on their behalf. This reliance on spiritual intervention often overshadowed the need for practical medical care, leaving many to suffer without proper treatment. The concept of purgatory also influenced the way people approached illness and food. The belief that one's soul might linger in a state of limbo after death created a sense of urgency around proper dietary practices. Families would often pray for the souls of their deceased, hoping that their efforts would help shorten their time in purgatory. This connection between food and faith added layers of complexity to the already challenging realities of peasant life. The influence of religion and culture on medieval food practices reveals a world where beliefs shaped every aspect of life, from what was eaten to how illness was understood. The dietary restrictions imposed by the church created a framework within which people navigated their daily existence, often leading to creative adaptations and communal resilience. Superstition surrounding food added a layer of complexity, as people sought to make sense of their world through rituals and beliefs that connected them to the divine. As we reflect on the interplay between food, faith, and culture in medieval society, we gain insights into the challenges faced by the peasantry and the enduring spirit of community that emerged from hardship. The stories of resilience, creativity, and hope that unfolded during this time continue to resonate today, reminding us of the profound impact that food and belief have on our lives. By understanding the intricacies of medieval food culture, we can better appreciate the journey that has brought us to the diverse and vibrant culinary landscape we enjoy today. In the harsh realities of medieval life, festivals and feasts provided a much-needed respite from the daily grind of labor and hardship. These occasions were not merely opportunities for indulgence. They were deeply ingrained rituals that fostered community spirit, reinforced social bonds, and celebrated the cycles of life and nature. The interplay between food and festivity was pivotal in shaping the culture of the time, as these gatherings became central to the rhythms of medieval society. The medieval calendar was punctuated by a series of festivals that aligned with the agricultural cycle, marking key moments in the farming year. These celebrations were closely tied to the seasons, reflecting the peasants' dependence on the land for their sustenance. As the months turned, each season brought its own unique set of festivities, allowing villagers to gather, celebrate, and share in the bounty of their hard work. Spring was a time of renewal, and the arrival of warmer weather was met with eager anticipation. The first signs of life in the fields were often celebrated with rituals and gatherings that honored the earth's awakening. One of the most significant events was the celebration of May Day, a festival that marked the beginning of the planting season. Villagers would come together to dance around a maypole, a vibrant symbol of fertility and rebirth, while enjoying feasting on freshly baked goods and seasonal produce. Imagine a small village coming alive with laughter and music as families danced in a circle around the maypole, weaving colorful ribbons around its base. Children would run about, picking wildflowers to decorate their homes, while adults prepared a communal feast that included pottage made with the first greens of the season. This celebration was not just about the arrival of spring, it was a reaffirmation of community and shared hope for a fruitful year ahead. As summer approached, the harvest season brought its own set of celebrations. The Feast of St. Michael, held in late September, marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of preparations for winter. This festival was a significant occasion for peasants, as they gathered to give thanks for the bounty of the land and to share the fruits of their labor with their neighbors. During the Feast of St. Michael, families would come together to feast on the last of the summer's produce, often preparing rich dishes that showcased the season's offerings. The tables would be laden with roasted meats, fresh vegetables, and hearty breads. As villagers shared their meals, stories of the harvest would be exchanged, each tale adding to the communal narrative that bound them together. The autumn months were a time for reflection, as families prepared for the long winter ahead. The act of preserving food became paramount, and the harvest festival served as a reminder of the importance of community and cooperation. Villagers would work together to can, pickle, and dry their foods, ensuring that they would have enough to sustain them through the cold months. Feast days in the medieval calendar often held both religious and cultural significance, providing a framework for communal life. These occasions were typically marked by special church services, followed by communal meals that brought families and neighbors together in celebration. The church played a vital role in organizing these events, reinforcing the connection between food, faith, and community. One of the most important feast days was Christmas, which combined both religious observance and joyous celebration. The Christmas feast was a time for families to gather and share abundant meals, often prepared with the best ingredients available. Roasted meats, spiced wines, and sweet pastries filled the tables, creating a festive atmosphere that lifted spirits during the cold winter months. The tradition of feasting during Christmas was not only about indulgence, it was also an expression of gratitude and a way to honor the birth of Christ. Families would often bring their best dishes to share with others, fostering a sense of unity and goodwill within the community. As the winter months dragged on, the Feast of St. Stephen, or Boxing Day, provided another opportunity for communal celebration. This day was marked by the tradition of the Lord of Misrule, where a peasant would be chosen to preside over the festivities. For one day, the social hierarchy was appended, and the common folk could revel in merriment and joy, free from the burdens of their everyday lives. Imagine the laughter and revelry that would fill the air as the Lord of Misrule commanded the festivities, issuing playful edicts and encouraging everyone to partake in the feasting. This temporary inversion of the social order allowed peasants to experience a brief respite from their struggles, reminding them that joy could still be found even in the most difficult of times. The communal aspect of these festivals was essential to the survival of medieval society. In a world where resources were often scarce, the act of sharing food became a vital expression of solidarity. During festivals, villagers would pool their resources, bringing together whatever they could spare to create a feast that everyone could enjoy. This spirit of cooperation fostered a sense of belonging and community, reinforcing social ties that were crucial for survival. In addition to the act of sharing food, these festivals provided opportunities for storytelling and the passing down of traditions. As families gathered around the table, they would recount tales of past harvests, legends of saints, and folklore that celebrated their cultural heritage. This oral tradition kept the memories of their ancestors alive, creating a sense of continuity that transcended the hardships they faced. The rituals surrounding these festivals also served to reinforce cultural identity. Medieval peasants often celebrated local customs and traditions that reflected their unique heritage, from specific dishes to the way they decorated their homes for the holidays. These practices not only brought joy and celebration but also instilled a sense of pride in their community and their way of life. As we reflect on the significance of festivals and feasts in medieval society, it becomes clear that these occasions were not mere distractions from hardship. They were essential components of life that helped people navigate the challenges of their world. The act of coming together to share a meal fostered resilience and solidarity, reminding individuals that they were not alone in their struggles. The influence of religion and culture on medieval food practices reveals a world where beliefs and communal rituals shaped every aspect of life, from what was eaten to how illness was understood. Festivals and feasts provided a necessary reprieve from the daily grind of labor and hardship, allowing families to come together in celebration and gratitude. As we explore the role of festivals in shaping medieval food culture, we gain insights into the challenges faced by the peasantry and the enduring spirit of community that emerged from these gatherings. The stories of resilience, creativity, and hope that unfolded during these times continue to resonate today, reminding us of the profound impact that food and belief have on our lives. Ultimately, the legacy of medieval festivals serves as a testament to the strength of the human spirit, the ability to find joy, connection, and meaning even in the face of adversity. By understanding the intricacies of these celebrations, we can better appreciate the journey that has brought us to the diverse and vibrant culinary landscape we enjoy today. Throughout medieval history, certain individuals left indelible marks on the culinary landscape, either through their influence in the kitchens of the nobility or through their remarkable contributions to food culture. These notable characters, ranging from celebrated chefs to powerful patrons, embodied the complexities of medieval cuisine and the interplay between social status, creativity, and survival. Among the most famous figures was Geoffrey Chaucer, the renowned poet and author of the Canterbury Tales. While Chaucer is primarily remembered for his literary contributions, his works also provide a unique glimpse into the culinary practices of his time. In the Canterbury Tales, Chaucer weaves vivid descriptions of food and feasting into the fabric of his narratives, highlighting the stark contrasts between the dining experiences of the wealthy and the common folk. Chaucer's portrayal of the Franklin, a character known for his love of good food and hospitality, illustrates the importance of feasting in medieval society. The Franklin is described as a man of substance who takes pride in his well-stocked pantry and lavish dinners. His home is filled with every imaginable delicacy, and he is known for offering generous portions to his guests. Chaucer writes, "He loved to be at a table in the morning, and he was a fine man with a snow-white beard. This depiction not only emphasizes the significance of food as a marker of wealth, but also showcases the social dynamics at play during meals. In contrast, Chaucer also introduces us to characters like the poor parson, whose humble diet reflects the struggles of the peasantry. The parson leads a life of piety and service, often foregoing the luxuries enjoyed by the likes of the franklin. Chaucer writes, "He was a shepherd and no mercenary." This juxtaposition of characters in the Canterbury Tales serves as a powerful commentary on the disparities in food access and the social hierarchies that defined medieval life. Another notable figure in the culinary world of medieval Europe was Master John of Crema, a chef who gained a reputation for his elaborate banquets and innovative dishes. Active in the late 14th century, Master John was known for his extravagant presentations and the use of exotic ingredients. His culinary creations were celebrated throughout the courts of Europe, and he served several notable patrons, including the Duke of Milan. Master John's legacy lies not only in his culinary skills, but also in his ability to capture the imagination of his guests. His banquets were theatrical events, complete with elaborate decorations and intricate serving methods. For instance, he was known to create elaborate centerpieces that would dazzle attendees, transforming the dining experience into a spectacle of art and creativity. Imagine entering a grand hall where the tables are adorned with artistic displays of food, each dish meticulously arranged to please the eye. Master John understood that dining was as much about the experience as it was about the food being served. His ability to meld culinary skill with artistic presentation helped elevate the status of chefs in medieval society, paving the way for future generations of culinary artists. In the realm of food production, Richard II of England also played a significant role in shaping the culinary landscape of medieval England. His reign, 1377 to 1399, marked a time of increased trade and cultural exchange, leading to the introduction of new ingredients and flavors that would influence English cuisine. Richard's court became a center for culinary innovation, as chefs experimented with various spices and cooking techniques. One notable event during Richard's reign was the Great Feast of 1390, a lavish banquet held to celebrate the king's royal progress. This feast is remembered for its extravagant display of food, featuring over 300 courses, including exotic dishes such as peacock, swan, and even camel. The sheer scale of the banquet highlighted the wealth and power of the monarchy while also showcasing the culinary advancements of the time. This feast exemplified the changing dynamics of medieval dining, where the act of feasting became both a means of asserting authority and a reflection of culinary creativity. Richard II's patronage of the culinary arts helped elevate the status of chefs and bakers, allowing them to gain recognition for their skills and artistry. Another significant contributor to medieval cuisine was Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th-century abbess, composer, and herbalist whose writings on food and health provided valuable insights into the dietary practices of the time. Hildegard's work, particularly her treatise Physica, emphasized the connection between food and health, advocating for the consumption of natural, wholesome ingredients. Hildegard believed that food could be a source of healing and nourishment, and she encouraged the use of herbs and spices to enhance both flavor and health benefits. Her writings highlighted the importance of balance in the diet, suggesting that moderation was key to maintaining good health. Imagine a medieval kitchen bustling with activity, where women prepared meals infused with the wisdom of Hildegard's teachings. They would gather herbs from the garden, carefully selecting the ingredients that would nourish their families while also promoting well-being. Hildegard's emphasis on natural remedies and holistic health contributed to the understanding of food as more than just sustenance. It became a vital aspect of spiritual and physical wellness. As we explore the lives of these notable characters, it becomes clear that their contributions to medieval cuisine were not only significant for their time, but also left lasting legacies that continue to influence our culinary practices today. The stories of Chaucer, Master John of Crema, Richard II, and Hildegard of Bingen reveal the rich tapestry of medieval food culture, where creativity, tradition, and societal norms intersected in fascinating ways. The culinary innovations of this time were often driven by necessity. As trade routes expanded and new ingredients became accessible, chefs and cooks began to experiment with flavors and techniques that were previously unheard of. This period saw the introduction of spices from the East, such as pepper, cinnamon, and cloves, which transformed the way food was prepared and served. The spice trade became a lucrative venture, with merchants traveling great distances to procure these coveted goods. The impact of these spices on medieval cuisine was profound. They allowed for the creation of dishes that were not only flavorful but also visually stunning. The use of spices became a symbol of status, with wealthier households employing them liberally to impress guests and assert their social standing. In addition to spices, The medieval period also saw the rise of new cooking techniques. The use of roasting, boiling, and baking became more refined, allowing for a greater variety of dishes to be prepared. Cooks began to understand the importance of presentation, often arranging food in elaborate displays that showcased their skills and creativity. One such technique was the use of subtleties, intricate pastry sculptures that were often served as centerpieces at banquets. These artful creations could take the form of animals, castles, or even mythical creatures, and were designed to be both visually striking and delicious. The tradition of serving subtleties at banquets became a hallmark of medieval feasting, illustrating the blend of culinary art and entertainment that defined the period. As we examine the culinary landscape of medieval Europe, it is essential to recognize the interconnectedness of food, culture, and society. The notable characters who shaped this world were not simply chefs or patrons. They were visionaries who understood the power of food to bring people together, to celebrate life, and to navigate the complexities of human existence. The stories of notable characters in medieval cuisine reveal the rich tapestry of culinary culture during this period. From Chaucer's literary explorations of food to the innovative practices of chefs like Master John of Crema, these figures shaped the way food was perceived and consumed in medieval society. Their legacies continue to resonate today, reminding us of the enduring power of food to connect us to our history, our communities, and ourselves. As we reflect on the contributions of these individuals, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities of medieval food culture. The culinary innovations born out of necessity, the artistic presentations that dazzled the senses, and the communal rituals that brought families together all speak to the resilience and creativity of those who lived during this time. Ultimately, the legacy of medieval cuisine is one of survival, adaptation, and the unyielding human spirit. By understanding the lives and contributions of these notable characters, we can better appreciate the journey that has brought us to the diverse and vibrant culinary landscape we enjoy today. The medieval period was a time of significant culinary evolution, marked by a flow of new ideas, ingredients, and techniques that transformed the way people approached food. As trade routes expanded and cultural exchanges occurred, the kitchen became a laboratory of sorts, where chefs and cooks experimented with flavors, preparation methods, and presentation styles. This subsection explores the innovations that emerged during this era, highlighting how they enriched the culinary landscape and laid the groundwork for modern cooking. One of the most notable changes in medieval cuisine was the increased availability of spices, which revolutionized the flavors of food. Spices such as pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves became highly sought-after commodities, often worth their weight in gold. The spice trade flourished during this time, with merchants traveling vast distances to procure these precious goods from the East and bring them back to Europe. Imagine the bustling markets of medieval cities, where traders hawked their wares, vibrant colors and intoxicating aromas filling the air. Spices were not merely used to enhance flavor, they were symbols of wealth and status. Nobles flaunted their ability to procure exotic spices, often using them lavishly in their banquets to impress guests and assert their social standing. The introduction of spices into everyday cooking had profound implications for the culinary practices of the time. No longer limited to simple flavors derived from local herbs and vegetables, cooks began to experiment with complex combinations that elevated dishes to new heights. The use of spices allowed for a greater depth of flavor, transforming the mundane into the extraordinary. For example, a simple pot of pottage could be elevated with just a pinch of pepper or a sprinkle of cinnamon, creating a dish that resonated with warmth and richness. The ability to flavor food in this way not only enhanced the dining experience but also allowed for the creation of signature dishes that became emblematic of specific regions and households. In addition to the influx of spices, advancements in cooking techniques played a crucial role in shaping medieval cuisine. The methods of roasting, boiling, and baking became more sophisticated, allowing for a wider variety of dishes to be prepared. Cooks began to understand the importance of heat control and timing, leading to the development of recipes that required precise measurements and techniques. Roasting, in particular, emerged as a favored method for preparing meats. Peasants and nobles alike used open flames and spits to cook their food, but the nobility took it a step further. In grand kitchens, massive roasting ovens and spits were built, allowing for whole animals to be cooked to perfection. The visual spectacle of a whole roast boar, adorned with fruits and herbs, was a hallmark of noble banquets, showcasing both culinary skill and the host's wealth. Baking also saw significant advancements during this period. The construction of communal ovens in towns and villages allowed for more consistent bread production. Peasants could bring their dough to the village oven, where skilled bakers would ensure that the bread was baked evenly and thoroughly. This communal aspect of baking reinforced social bonds, as families would gather to share their stories while waiting for their loaves to cook. Moreover, the craft of pastry making began to flourish. The creation of elaborate pastries, known as subtleties, became popular among the nobility. These intricate pastry sculptures were often designed to resemble animals, castles, or other fantastical shapes, serving as both a culinary delight and a centerpiece for grand feasts. The artistry involved in creating these subtle displays showcased the skill of the bakers and the creativity of the chefs, transforming food into an art form. As medieval people navigated the challenges of food scarcity, preservation methods became increasingly important. With no modern refrigeration, they had to rely on techniques that would keep food safe for consumption over long periods. Salting, smoking, drying, and fermenting were all common practices that evolved during this time. The process of salting became more refined as cooks learned to balance the right amount of salt to ensure the preservation of meats without rendering them inedible. This method allowed for meat to be stored for months, providing a crucial source of sustenance during the winter months. The art of curing meats, such as ham or bacon, became a point of pride for many households, with families developing their own unique recipes and techniques. Smoking was another technique that gained prominence in medieval kitchens. The act of smoking meats not only preserved them but also imparted a distinctive flavor that was highly prized. Cooks would hang meats over smoldering fires, creating a rich, smoky aroma that filled the kitchen. This method became synonymous with winter preparations, as families would stockpile smoked meats to carry them through the lean months ahead. Drying fruits and vegetables also became a vital practice, allowing peasants to enjoy seasonal produce long after the harvest had ended. The process of sun-drying fruits, such as apples and pears, was a common way to ensure that they could be consumed during the winter. Peasants would slice the fruits and lay them out on rooftops or in sunny spots, watching closely as they transformed from fresh and juicy to dried and concentrated in flavor. Fermentation was another critical aspect of food preservation. Villagers would often ferment vegetables, creating pickles and sauerkraut that not only provided variety to their diets but also offered essential nutrients during the long winter months. The act of fermenting food was not merely a means of preservation, it was a tradition that connected families to their ancestors, as recipes were passed down through generations. The innovations in medieval cuisine were not solely the result of individual creativity, they were shaped by the social dynamics of the time. The kitchens of the nobility became hotbeds of culinary experimentation, where chefs sought to impress their patrons with elaborate dishes and stunning presentations. The competition among cooks led to a culture of innovation, where new techniques and flavors were constantly being explored. However, these innovations often came at a cost. The pressure to produce extraordinary meals could lead to unethical practices, such as food adulteration and deception. Ultimately, the legacy of medieval cuisine is one of survival, adaptation, and the unyielding human spirit. By understanding the lives and contributions of these notable characters, we can better appreciate the journey that has brought us to the diverse and vibrant culinary landscape we enjoy today. The medieval period was a time of significant culinary evolution, marked by a flow of new ideas, ingredients, and techniques that transformed the way people approached food. As trade routes expanded and cultural exchanges occurred, the kitchen became a laboratory of sorts, where chefs and cooks experimented with flavors, preparation methods, and presentation styles. This subsection explores the innovations that emerged during this era, highlighting how they enriched the culinary landscape and laid the groundwork for modern cooking. One of the most notable changes in medieval cuisine was the increased availability of spices, which revolutionized the flavors of food. Spices such as pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves became highly sought-after commodities, often worth their weight in gold. The spice trade flourished during this time, with merchants traveling vast distances to procure these precious goods from the East and bring them back to Europe. Imagine the bustling markets of medieval cities, where traders hawked their wares, vibrant colors and intoxicating aromas filling the air. Spices were not merely used to enhance flavor, they were symbols of wealth and status. Nobles flaunted their ability to procure exotic spices, often using them lavishly in their banquets to impress guests and assert their social standing. The introduction of spices into everyday cooking had profound implications for the culinary practices of the time. No longer limited to simple flavors derived from local herbs and vegetables, cooks began to experiment with complex combinations that elevated dishes to new heights. The use of spices allowed for a greater depth of flavor, transforming the mundane into the extraordinary. For example, a simple pot of pottage could be elevated with just a pinch of pepper or a sprinkle of cinnamon, creating a dish that resonated with warmth and richness. The ability to flavor food in this way not only enhanced the dining experience but also allowed for the creation of signature dishes that became emblematic of specific regions and households. In addition to the influx of spices, advancements in cooking techniques played a crucial role in shaping medieval cuisine. The methods of roasting, boiling, and baking became more sophisticated, allowing for a wider variety of dishes to be prepared. Cooks began to understand the importance of heat control and timing, leading to the development of recipes that required precise measurements and techniques. Roasting, in particular, emerged as a favored method for preparing meats. Peasants and nobles alike used open flames and spits to cook their food, but the nobility took it a step further. In grand kitchens, massive roasting ovens and spits were built, allowing for whole animals to be cooked to perfection. The visual spectacle of a whole roast boar, adorned with fruits and herbs, was a hallmark of noble banquets, showcasing both culinary skill and the host's wealth. Baking also saw significant advancements during this period. The construction of communal ovens in towns and villages allowed for more consistent bread production. Peasants could bring their dough to the village oven, where skilled bakers would ensure that the bread was baked evenly and thoroughly. This communal aspect of baking reinforced social bonds, as families would gather to share their stories while waiting for their loaves to cook. Moreover, the craft of pastry making began to flourish. The creation of elaborate pastries, known as subtleties, became popular among the nobility. These intricate pastry sculptures were often designed to resemble animals, castles, or other fantastical shapes, serving as both a culinary delight and a centerpiece for grand feasts. The artistry involved in creating these subtle displays showcased the skill of the bakers and the creativity of the chefs, transforming food into an art form. As medieval people navigated the challenges of food scarcity, preservation methods became increasingly important. With no modern refrigeration, they had to rely on techniques that would keep food safe for consumption over long periods. Salting, smoking, drying, and fermenting were all common practices that evolved during this time. The process of salting became more refined as cooks learned to balance the right amount of salt to ensure the preservation of meats without rendering them inedible. This method allowed for meat to be stored for months, providing a crucial source of sustenance during the winter months. The art of curing meats, such as ham or bacon, became a point of pride for many households, with families developing their own unique recipes and techniques. Smoking was another technique that gained prominence in medieval kitchens. The act of smoking meats not only preserved them but also imparted a distinctive flavor that was highly prized. Cooks would hang meats over smoldering fires, creating a rich, smoky aroma that filled the kitchen. This method became synonymous with winter preparations, as families would stockpile smoked meats to carry them through the lean months ahead. Drying fruits and vegetables also became a vital practice, allowing peasants to enjoy seasonal produce long after the harvest had ended. The process of sun-drying fruits, such as apples and pears, was a common way to ensure that they could be consumed during the winter. Peasants would slice the fruits and lay them out on rooftops or in sunny spots, watching closely as they transformed from fresh and juicy to dried and concentrated in flavor. Fermentation was another critical aspect of food preservation. Villagers would often ferment vegetables, creating pickles and sauerkraut that not only provided variety to their diets but also offered essential nutrients during the long winter months. The act of fermenting food was not merely a means of preservation. It was a tradition that connected families to their ancestors, as recipes were passed down through generations. The innovations in medieval cuisine were not solely the result of individual creativity. They were shaped by the social dynamics of the time. The kitchens of the nobility became hotbeds of culinary experimentation, where chefs sought to impress their patrons with elaborate dishes and stunning presentations. The competition among cooks led to a culture of innovation, where new techniques and flavors were constantly being explored. However, these innovations often came at a cost. The pressure to produce extraordinary meals could lead to unethical practices, such as food adulteration and deception. Ultimately, the legacy of medieval cuisine is one of survival, adaptation, and the unyielding human spirit. By understanding the lives and contributions of these notable characters, we can better appreciate the journey that has brought us to the diverse and vibrant culinary landscape we enjoy today. The medieval period was a time of significant culinary evolution, marked by a flow of new ideas, ingredients, and techniques that transformed the way people approached food. As trade routes expanded and cultural exchanges occurred, the kitchen became a laboratory of sorts, where chefs and cooks experimented with flavors, preparation methods, and presentation styles. This subsection explores the innovations that emerged during this era, highlighting how they enriched the culinary landscape and laid the groundwork for modern cooking. One of the most notable changes in medieval cuisine was the increased availability of spices, which revolutionized the flavors of food. Spices such as pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves became highly sought-after commodities, often worth their weight in gold. The spice trade flourished during this time, with merchants traveling vast distances to procure these precious goods from the East and bring them back to Europe. Imagine the bustling markets of medieval cities, where traders hawked their wares, vibrant colors and intoxicating aromas filling the air. Spices were not merely used to enhance flavor, they were symbols of wealth and status. Nobles flaunted their ability to procure exotic spices, often using them lavishly in their banquets to impress guests and assert their social standing. The introduction of spices into everyday cooking had profound implications for the culinary practices of the time. No longer limited to simple flavors derived from local herbs and vegetables, cooks began to experiment with complex combinations that elevated dishes to new heights. The use of spices allowed for a greater depth of flavor, transforming the mundane into the extraordinary. For example, a simple pot of pottage could be elevated with just a pinch of pepper or a sprinkle of cinnamon, creating a dish that resonated with warmth and richness. The ability to flavor food in this way not only enhanced the dining experience but also allowed for the creation of signature dishes that became emblematic of specific regions and households. In addition to the influx of spices, advancements in cooking techniques played a crucial role in shaping medieval cuisine. The methods of roasting, boiling, and baking became more sophisticated, allowing for a wider variety of dishes to be prepared. Cooks began to understand the importance of heat control and timing, leading to the development of recipes that required precise measurements and techniques. Roasting, in particular, emerged as a favored method for preparing meats. Peasants and nobles alike used open flames and spits to cook their food, but the nobility took it a step further. In grand kitchens, massive roasting ovens and spits were built, allowing for whole animals to be cooked to perfection. The visual spectacle of a whole roast boar, adorned with fruits and herbs, was a hallmark of noble banquets, showcasing both culinary skill and the host's wealth. Baking also saw significant advancements during this period. The construction of communal ovens in towns and villages allowed for more consistent bread production. Peasants could bring their dough to the village oven, where skilled bakers would ensure that the bread was baked evenly and thoroughly. This communal aspect of baking reinforced social bonds, as families would gather to share their stories while waiting for their loaves to cook. Moreover, the craft of pastry making began to flourish. The creation of elaborate pastries, known as subtleties, became popular among the nobility. These intricate pastry sculptures were often designed to resemble animals, castles, or other fantastical shapes, serving as both a culinary delight and a centerpiece for grand feasts. The artistry involved in creating these subtle displays showcased the skill of the bakers and the creativity of the chefs, transforming food into an art form. As medieval people navigated the challenges of food scarcity, preservation methods became increasingly important. With no modern refrigeration, they had to rely on techniques that would keep food safe for consumption over long periods. Salting, smoking, drying, and fermenting were all common practices that evolved during this time. The process of salting became more refined as cooks learned to balance the right amount of salt to ensure the preservation of meats without rendering them inedible. This method allowed for meat to be stored for months, providing a crucial source of sustenance during the winter months. The art of curing meats, such as ham or bacon, became a point of pride for many households, with families developing their own unique recipes and techniques. Smoking was another technique that gained prominence in medieval kitchens. The act of smoking meats not only preserved them but also imparted a distinctive flavor that was highly prized. Cooks would hang meats over smoldering fires, creating a rich, smoky aroma that filled the kitchen. This method became synonymous with winter preparations, as families would stockpile smoked meats to carry them through the lean months ahead. Drying fruits and vegetables also became a vital practice, allowing peasants to enjoy seasonal produce long after the harvest had ended. The process of sun-drying fruits, such as apples and pears, was a common way to ensure that they could be consumed during the winter. Peasants would slice the fruits and lay them out on rooftops or in sunny spots, watching closely as they transformed from fresh and juicy to dried and concentrated in flavor. Fermentation was another critical aspect of food preservation. Villagers would often ferment vegetables, creating pickles and sauerkraut that not only provided variety to their diets but also offered essential nutrients during the long winter months. The act of fermenting food was not merely a means of preservation, it was a tradition that connected families to their ancestors, as recipes were passed down through generations. The innovations in medieval cuisine were not solely the result of individual creativity, They were shaped by the social dynamics of the time. The kitchens of the nobility became hotbeds of culinary experimentation, where chefs sought to impress their patrons with elaborate dishes and stunning presentations. The competition among cooks led to a culture of innovation, where new techniques and flavors were constantly being explored. However, these innovations often came at a cost. The pressure to produce extraordinary meals could lead to unethical practices, such as food adulteration and deception. This shift towards inclusivity mirrors the way medieval cuisine evolved through the exchange of ideas, ingredients, and practices across cultures. As we reflect on the legacy of medieval cuisine, it becomes clear that the innovations, traditions, and cultural practices that emerged during this time have left an indelible mark on our culinary landscape. From the evolution of ingredients and flavors to the communal spirit of dining and the impact of social hierarchies, the stories of medieval food culture continue to resonate today. The resilience and creativity of medieval people in the face of adversity serve as a powerful reminder of the enduring human spirit. Their ability to adapt, innovate, and find joy in communal meals and celebrations speaks to the profound impact of food on our lives. By understanding the intricacies of medieval cuisine and its legacy, we can better appreciate the journey that has brought us to the diverse and vibrant culinary practices we enjoy today. The lessons learned during this time continue to inform our relationship with food, encouraging us to embrace community, sustainability, and the joy of sharing meals with those we love. As we draw our exploration of medieval cuisine to a close, it's essential to reflect on the myriad lessons and insights gathered from this journey through the culinary landscape of the Middle Ages. The stark contrasts between the diets of the nobility and the peasantry reveal not only the disparities in food access but also underscore the broader societal structures that shaped daily life during this period. Through the lens of food, we gain profound insights into the resilience, creativity, and adaptability of those who lived in a time marked by hardship and scarcity. Throughout our discussion, we have highlighted several critical themes that defined medieval food culture. First, we examined the daily meals of peasants, whose diets primarily consisted of pottage and coarse bread. These simple, often monotonous meals were a testament to the struggle for survival in a world where resources were limited. The ingenuity of peasants in making the most of what little they had, combined with their reliance on seasonal ingredients, created a culinary tapestry rich in tradition yet fraught with challenges. In contrast, the lavish banquets of the nobility showcased the opulence of medieval life, where extravagant displays of food and drink served as symbols of power and prestige. However, these feasts were not without their dangers. The risks of foodborne illness, the consequences of overindulgence, and the social and political ramifications of these gatherings all contributed to a complex culinary landscape where every meal carried weighty implications. The influence of the Church on dietary practices cannot be overlooked. The enforcement of fasting periods and dietary restrictions added layers of complexity to the already challenging lives of medieval people. Superstitions and beliefs surrounding food shaped not only what was consumed but also how individuals viewed health and illness. The rituals of communal dining, the significance of festivals and feasts, and the shared experiences of joy and hardship fostered a sense of community that transcended the struggles of everyday life. Finally, we explored the notable characters who shaped medieval cuisine, from Geoffrey Chaucer and Master John of Crema to Richard II and Hildegard of Bingen. These figures exemplified the interplay between culinary innovation and social dynamics, leaving behind legacies that continue to influence our understanding of food and culture today. The enduring legacy of medieval cuisine is one of resilience. The ability of peasants to endure the hardships of their daily lives, to adapt and innovate in the face of food scarcity, speaks to the unyielding human spirit. They found ways to create community and connection through food, using shared meals and celebrations as a means of reinforcing social bonds and cultural identity. In an era marked by uncertainty, the act of gathering around a table, sharing stories, and breaking bread together provided a sanctuary from the harsh realities of life. These moments of joy, however fleeting, served as reminders that even in the darkest of times, there is strength in community and hope in the promise of a better tomorrow. As we consider the challenges faced by medieval people, we are reminded of the importance of gratitude for the abundance we enjoy today. Modern advancements in agriculture, food safety, and culinary techniques have transformed our relationship with food, allowing us to savor a diverse array of flavors and ingredients without fear of illness or scarcity. Yet, we must also acknowledge that the struggles of the past have shaped our present, and the lessons learned from medieval cuisine continue to resonate today. In reflecting on medieval food culture, it is essential to express gratitude for the advancements that have taken place over the centuries. The evolution of ingredients, cooking techniques, and preservation methods has enriched our culinary landscape, enabling us to create meals that are not only nutritious but also flavorful and diverse. The accessibility of spices and exotic ingredients that were once reserved for the wealthy now allows home cooks to experiment with bold flavors and innovative recipes. The rise of artisanal movements, farm-to-table initiatives, and a renewed emphasis on sustainability reflect a growing awareness of the importance of food quality and ethical sourcing. These developments echo the resourcefulness of medieval peasants who made the most of what they had, while also fostering a sense of community and connection to the land. Moreover, the lessons learned from the past encourage us to be mindful of our food choices and their impact on ourselves and the environment. The medieval experience of food scarcity and the creativity that emerged from it serve as a reminder of the importance of preserving culinary traditions, supporting local agriculture, and fostering a sense of community through shared meals. In a world where convenience often trumps quality, we can draw inspiration from the resourcefulness of medieval folk who celebrated what little they had and found joy in the act of sharing food. Their resilience in the face of adversity should inspire us to appreciate the bounty on our plates and the journey it took to get there. As we conclude our exploration of medieval cuisine, let us carry forward the stories of resilience, creativity, and community that have shaped our understanding of food and its significance in our lives. The legacy of medieval food culture reminds us that food is not just sustenance. It is a reflection of who we are, where we come from, and the connections we forge with others. In a world that continues to grapple with issues of food security, access, and inequality, we must remain vigilant in advocating for change. By honoring the lessons of the past and celebrating the diversity of our culinary heritage, we can work towards a future where everyone has access to nourishing food and the opportunity to gather around a table in fellowship. As you sit down to your next meal, take a moment to savor not just the flavors on your plate but also the history behind them. Remember the countless generations of people who have toiled and struggled to bring us to this point, and let their resilience inspire you to embrace your own culinary journey. Together, we can ensure that the stories of medieval cuisine continue to resonate, reminding us of the enduring power of food to connect us all. As we conclude our exploration of medieval cuisine, it's fitting to take a moment to reflect on the profound connections between food, culture, and the human experience. The stories of resilience, creativity, and community that emerged from the culinary struggles of medieval peasants and nobles alike continue to echo through the ages, reminding us of the enduring power of food to connect us across time and space. Throughout our journey, we've uncovered the stark realities of life in medieval Europe, where the simple act of eating was often fraught with challenges and hardships. As I sit down to share this epilogue with you, I can't help but think of how far we have come in our culinary evolution. The abundance and variety of food available today are a testament to the ingenuity and perseverance of those who came before us. In my own culinary journey, I've often found myself drawn to the stories behind the dishes I prepare. Each recipe carries with it a piece of history, a connection to the past that informs how we eat today. Whether it's a rustic loaf of bread, a hearty stew, or a festive feast, I find joy in understanding the origins of these foods and the people who once relied on them for sustenance. For instance, when I bake bread, I think of the medieval bakers who faced the daunting task of producing loaves for their families and communities. I imagine them kneading dough, their hands working tirelessly to create something nourishing from the limited resources they had. The process of making bread, while simpler now with modern conveniences, still connects me to those who have come before, reminding me of the resilience embedded in this age-old practice. The communal aspect of food is another enduring legacy of medieval cuisine that resonates deeply with me. In an age where convenience often trumps connection, I cherish the moments spent gathering around the table with family and friends. Whether it's a holiday feast, a casual dinner, or a potluck, these meals are opportunities to celebrate relationships and share experiences. The act of sharing food fosters a sense of belonging and community that is vital in today's fast-paced world. I think back to the harvest festivals of medieval times, where families would come together to celebrate their hard work and the bounty of the land. These gatherings were not just about the food, they were about creating memories, reinforcing social bonds, and honoring the cycles of life. In my own life, I strive to carry forward this tradition of communal dining. I often invite friends and family over for meals, encouraging everyone to bring a dish to share. This not only allows us to enjoy a variety of flavors, but also fosters a sense of connection and creativity as we exchange recipes and cooking techniques. The laughter and stories shared around the table are what make these gatherings truly special, echoing the spirit of medieval feasting. As we reflect on the lessons learned from medieval food culture, we must also acknowledge that the struggles of the past continue to resonate in our modern world. Issues of food insecurity, access, and inequality remain pressing challenges that require our attention and action. The disparities between the wealthy and the poor that were so pronounced in medieval society are still evident today. Many communities face food deserts, where access to fresh and nutritious food is limited. The fight for food justice is ongoing, and it is our responsibility to advocate for change. By supporting local farmers, participating in community-supported agriculture, CSA, programs, and advocating for policies that promote food equity, we can work towards a future where everyone has access to nourishing food. It is crucial to remember that food is not just a commodity. It is a fundamental human right. In the spirit of the medieval communal meals, I encourage you to engage with your community around food. Whether it's volunteering at a local food bank, participating in community gardens, or simply sharing meals with neighbors, every act of kindness and solidarity contributes to building a more just food system. The medieval period was a time of culinary exploration, where trade routes opened up access to new ingredients and flavors. As we move forward, it's important to embrace the diversity of culinary traditions that have emerged over the centuries. In today's globalized world, we have the opportunity to celebrate the myriad of flavors and cuisines available to us. I find joy in exploring different culinary traditions, experimenting with ingredients from around the world, and learning about the stories that accompany them. This exploration not only enriches my cooking but also fosters a deeper understanding and appreciation for the cultures that have shaped our food landscape. Whether it's trying my hand at making Indian curry, Italian pasta, or Mexican tamales, each dish tells a story that connects me to the people and places from which it originates. This culinary journey is a celebration of diversity, a reminder that food transcends borders and unites us all in our shared humanity. As we reflect on the journey through medieval cuisine, it's essential to carry forward the lessons learned from the past. The resilience, creativity, and communal spirit that defined medieval food culture remind us of the importance of connection, gratitude, and mindfulness in our culinary practices today. In our fast-paced modern world, it can be easy to overlook the significance of food in our lives. Yet, as we gather around the table, we have the chance to honor the stories of those who came before us, to appreciate the bounty of the earth, and to forge connections with our communities. So, as you sit down to your next meal, take a moment to reflect on the history behind the food on your plate. Consider the generations of people who have labored to bring these ingredients to your table and hold gratitude for the progress we have made in our culinary journey. Let us remember the medieval peasants who persevered through hunger and hardship, who celebrated moments of joy and togetherness, and who found resilience in their shared experiences. Their legacy lives on in our ability to connect through food, to honor the past, and to strive for a future where everyone can enjoy the simple pleasures of a full belly and a warm hearth.